Good morning, Rich. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning, Pat. I'm all right. Good afternoon, Pat. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit later in the day here, but yeah, I'm doing all right, mate. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm suffering in the heat. We've reached the time of year where it's just insufferable. We like the heat in the summer. We boat. I live on a lake, but when you get to the end of July, 105 degrees. There's a heat dome outside. That would be Fahrenheit here. I guess y'all use Celsius for my
Yeah,
British
yeah,
buddies.
I'm gonna look that up. Give me 1 sec. So 105 degrees Fahrenheit in Celsius is ooh,
Yeah.
40 Yeah, that's hot,
We should
man.
be,
That's hot. And you got that humidity,
yeah,
right?
we got like 85. Yeah, my dogs don't even want to walk. I'm like, I opened the door this morning and the dog, Ivan looks up and he's like, no, bro, I'm not doing this. He's like, I want you to go down there, use the bathroom on the third mailbox on the left. I want you to bark at the Brittany Spaniel 2 houses down and harass the guy in the blue truck if he comes by, but I'm not going to do that this morning. Just hanging here. Because yeah, well, so I just wanted our British friends to know we weren't dead. So, what would that be Celsius?
So that's 40 degrees Celsius. So that is the record we had over here was 41.9 in
Oh,
London a
well,
few years ago. So that was and that I mean in London that was really quite something. That was very, very unpleasant. But yeah, that's hot. And we don't have the aircon over here, Pat. We don't like that's like it's very, very, very rare that anyone would have aircon in their
you don't
house.
have them in the house.
Obviously you
Don't
guys
have them
it's
in the
like
cars.
I would have it in the car, but like in a domestic home, we don't have it. An office block, they might have it, or like a restaurant might have it, but like at home, no way. So like that, when it's that hot, we suffer because we haven't really needed it, right? We haven't really needed it until quite recently, like as everything kind of heats up.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, we haven't needed it so much.
well,
So
we didn't have it here for a long time. And if you ever talk to, you go to older people, like you go to your grandparents' house over here that would be 80 something years old, and you're sitting there and they've just got it toasty. That doesn't seem to affect them. Now, I don't
yeah.
know how people survive. And even up north, uh, I know you were, telling me the temperature is similar, but you're more similar, New York and along the Midwest and the South. It just gets. That's why nobody lived here until they invented air conditioning. Then everybody, that's a pretty cool place since we can now go inside. But
Do you have it in your like? How do they put it into a trailer though, Pat? Right.
they put a block of ice in the window. And then
Okay.
then
Yeah.
we put the box fans that we had at our grandparents' house, and it just blows the ice in there.
Nice.
That's how we do it. Actually, that's what you had when you visited when I was growing up and you visited your grandparents. They might not even have the AC. You'd be sleeping in the living room and they'd have some one big box fan blowing and you're just in there like, for the love of God, can I please survive this? But AC without that, I don't know. But this is as hot as it's been here for quite some, it's always been that way. But it's just people aren't used to it. We used to practice football out in this stuff 2 days. We had what we call August two-a-days. Hottest time of the year. We'd practice one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And the coaches thought that they were helping us build stamina by depriving us of water. We'd get 1 cup of water. We'd be so thirsty, we'd have the trainer dip a towel in a water bucket and throw it into the huddle so we could all suck on it to get a little moisture out. And they would arrest a coach that did that today. But that's kind
Yeah. Yeah. But for sure, that would be like human rights
of, yeah,
violation. Like,
yeah. Well, they
like, and like, rightly so.
yeah, not a lot of human rights on the football field. You just can't went out there and toughed it, but we handled it. But anyway, it's good to see you, and I know you had a great meeting that you had just attended. Before we get to this, I want to mention the passing of a great British icon, um, in Ozzy Osbourne. Was that kind of a big deal in Britain when with his passing?
Yeah, for sure. So Ozzy was from a place called Aston in a city called Birmingham, which is I lived there for a while. I actually cleaned up in Birmingham, and Aston is a like it's a troubled, very poor part of what has been a troubled and quite poor city historically. And yeah, I mean they did amazing. Those guys, they came from nothing, and Ozzy was, I think saying national treasure wouldn't be too far off. So um I know that he was quite ill for quite a long time. He's obviously very impacted by his drug use. And yeah, like I think it's really it's a sad moment, right?
Yeah,
Sad
I
moment that he
mentioned it
passed.
for
Great musician.
yeah, I mentioned well, that's one of the things that's so cool about these guys that came from England and had such an impact. You mentioned those guys. You had guys like Ozzy, and they came from these, like Birmingham. Of course, we've heard of Birmingham. We have Birmingham in Alabama. We stole all the English names. Every
Alabama.
English, every. I lived in Bridgewater, New Jersey. New Jersey, by the way. We just started. Yeah, in Somerset County, by the way. There's a Somerset County.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we
Just
hack
lift.
we hack all the actually because it was the British doing all the naming until we decided, hey, we've pretty much got this, but we're not paying you any money anymore. Um, but to think of those guys, they were just guys and going to London or whatever, playing the band, going up and down. What do they call it? The M5, the main highway.
Would have been the M5, yeah, M5 or M40. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
we've many different
but
ones, many,
but
like your interstates, but yeah, they would have toured all around
but
and
to
stuff.
make
Yeah, for
such an
sure.
incredible impact. The next thing you know, they're playing for 60,000, 70,000. I mean, they have these young guys that they all kind of knew each other. And before I get on what I was going to talk about, that's one of the things that Mississippi here has in common with the English, with its music, because we call ourselves in Mississippi the birthplace of music in America. Now, people will dispute that, but it's on the sign when you enter the state, so it must be true. And we started with probably on the internet too, but country music. We had people Jimmy Rogers, Charlie Pride. So a lot of so country music actually kind of got a lot of its base in Mississippi. And did you ever hear of an Irish country music, country western uh, partnership called Logan McCool?
Rings a bell, but
Kind,
that's
kind, kind
about
of.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
I say that because I've noticed that we have some listeners from Ireland, and could be some of my people that stayed there when we ran out of potatoes. But there was a country western group called Logan McCool, and Pat McCool was the he was in a wheelchair, and Logue was blind. But they were really good. If you ever Google them and listen to "When the Cowboy Rides Away," it's my wife's favorite country song. But these one was blind, one was in a wheelchair, and they were these big country western singers in Ireland. And Pat McCool died 7 or 8 years ago, and my wife started getting all of these condolences. There were condolences on Facebook, people contacting. I'm so sorry to hear about Pat. She's freaking out. What's happening? Because I was out on the road, doing comedy. She thinks I'm dead. Well, we found out this guy died over in Ireland, named Pat McCool. So obviously they weren't that big over in England.
I may have just missed it, Pat. I was,
Google it when you
I was taking a lot of
get.
drugs, taking a lot of drugs for a long time. Like there's a period from about 98 through to about 2010 where like there were many cultural phenomenon that I missed, put it that
Yeah.
way. Do you know what I mean? So if it happened in that period, there's no
Yeah,
guarantee
that'd
that
be
I
about
would have
75 and
got the
80
right.
for me. But back to the musical influence. So the music, it starts in the Delta. These poor black guys, the blues, Howling Wolf, Robert Johnson, the blues are all coming out of the Mississippi Delta. Um, which is about 3 hours north of me. I've actually never been into the Delta. I've driven past it. But so this blues music was coming out of there, and it wasn't not a lot of people knew about it, but the records were being made. This is as the music was kind of growing a little bit, and then the Beatles come along, and then the whole British invasion starts. Well, when you talk to most of those guys, they will say that their biggest influence were the blues musicians, were the B.B. Kings and the Howling Wolves and the Robert Johnsons, the guys that came out of the Delta. So it starts in these poor little juke joints up in the Delta. The British start picking up on it, start hearing it, and then they take the blues and turn it into the big popular rock and roll, which also, because some people said, well, you kind of came in and took from them, but that in turn caused these guys to get more famous because, they would give credit to the BB Kings and the people like that. So there was kind of a symbiotic relationship between Mississippi it going over to England, and then they turn around and bring it back over here, which started the whole music revolution that we have today, which uh, which Ozzy was part of, and I bring him up for a couple of reasons. He has a sentimental place in my heart. One of the first albums I ever had was Black Sabbath Paranoid. I stole it from my British friends. I nicked it from. Did I get that right? I nicked it from the Eckerd's drugstore and they would come in albums. So me and my friend would get in, and one of us would pick it up and move it towards the front, and the other one would keep moving to the other, grabbed it and walked and went out the door with it. But Black Sabbath Paranoid was one of my first albums, and then as I've told you before, I played Ozzy on the biography channel on Celebrity Ghost Stories on the Jack Osbourne edition. And I actually looked just like him. As I told you, they dyed my hair solid black and told me it'd wash out in a couple of weeks, but it didn't. I walked around New York for 7 or 8 months looking like the creepy old guy at the concert. But I had the Oz look. But one of the reasons I bring him up, yeah, it was a he had no idea the impact that he made. But when Ozzy passed, and I don't know if as I don't know how you think, as a believer, but many of us Christians, the first thing we think about when someone like that passes, did they know Jesus? Because I don't know if that pops into your head. But let me tell you an interesting thing that my wife showed me. Because after he passed, she said, um, I've been praying for Ozzy, and my wife does. She has this prayer list, and it impacts a lot of people. My wife gets things where she'll wake up and say, I had this really uh, I felt this urge to pray for so and so, and it'll happen for 2 or 3 days. Then she'll find out something was going on in this person's life that was really, it's spooky how it happens. She's not just kind of making this up. She said, I've been praying for Ozzy for a long time. And then she showed me this guy, and his name is Dylan Novak. And he goes by uh, Celebrity Evangelist, I think, on Instagram. I don't do a lot of Instagram, but he interviewed Ozzy, I don't know how long ago, 2 years ago. And he said that Ozzy at the time said he mainly identified himself as a Christian. And he asked
Brilliant.
him, did he read the Bible? And he said, well, I try, but I can't understand it. And he said, well, he somehow translated a Bible for him. And Ozzy read it, said, "Yeah, I read it. I can, yeah, I can read it. I can understand this." And after the first episode that guy did, after interviewing Ozzy and saying Ozzy had claimed to be, Ozzy said he mainly identified as a Christian. He he asked said, I want everybody to pray for him and his family. Now, 5 or 6 years ago, they had that show where Jack would do the ghost, not the TV show that I
Yeah.
was in, but the one they would sit there and they would rate, whether they think this is real or whatever. And they asked them this on a scale of 1 to 10, who do we think would be more likely to believe in God? And I think Ozzy said he was a 6 or 7 or whatever. So at the time, I don't think he was. But this guy said at that time, he said, I mainly identify myself as a Christian. And that guy asked all these people to pray. Well, he said he got 24,000 likes on that particular interview. Well, a lot of times when people, they're liking it, doesn't mean they're all praying for him, but a lot of the people that would be liking that post means they're doing that. So thousands of people were praying for Ozzy in his final years of his life. I'm convinced that he knew Jesus by the time he died, because this guy came back out and had another interview with him, and it was about the Bible and where he translated and read the Bible, and it was very important. He said it was very important to him, and he ran into his son Jack at some convention, and Jack came up to him to tell him how important that Bible was to him. So I think there might be a lesson there to folks. It's never too late. I know people think that Ozzy.
Well, it's never.
Go ahead.
But no, thank you. But it's like it's never too late, is it? You look at the guy on the cross next to Jesus. Like with his last breath. You know what I mean? He believed with his last breath. And I think that's the wonderful, like the amazing thing about grace. Is like it's never too late. I know my dad came to know Jesus in the last years of his
Right.
life. And we were all by his like deathbed, and like a priest turned up, and it was like that was like the priest that we didn't know, because that was my dad. He's very kind of compartmentalized kind of guy, but yeah, like this priest turned up, and he'd come to know him at the end of his life. And I just think, that in a way that sums up grace, doesn't it? That if the criminal on the cross next to Jesus with his last breath, could confess that, like, yeah, you're the King of Kings, the Son of God made man. There's there's hope for all of us, right? There's hope for
Right.
everyone. So yeah, I really hope that he did. And of course, like, what Ozzy represented, and kind of, was was the opposite of the, like, strong, like, occult references and stuff like that. But then but to hear that that's where he went at the end of his life is like, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful.
And some of those guys, when they're young, they're just rock and rollers trying to have success and make money. Ozzy, throughout the years, they asked him about the devil worship. He said, "I just want to make music." Um, when they had, they all wore these crosses, and people misconstrue that. They think they're just wearing these crosses to mock. And he said no in an earlier interview. He said what that was one of our bandmates' mothers was a devout, you know, Christian. I don't know if she's Catholic or what, but she said when the guy was going to go off and they were starting the band and they were going off, she didn't really want him to do it, but she said, well, look, take this cross. She said, wear this around your neck. And she said, and if you always wear this, everything will work out. And he said, and the rest of them were like, yeah, okay, well, we'll do it too. They weren't trying to mock anything. They just wore the crosses. And they said what happened they had an album where there was a cross upside down on the album cover. So people think certainly this is what they're mocking. He said, no, we didn't. We were very upset about that. He said, the guy at a record company, we didn't know anything about that. The album comes out and there it is. And the guy, that band member was very upset. His mother was very upset. He said, but no, it was never about that. We were just making, even though they did have references in their music, but and talking about Ozzy, 70 something years old, but you and I both. I'm the least likely guy after my teenage years to become a follower of Jesus. You're the same way, and it's one of the reasons why we're doing this. But just wanted to share that to people. If the Celebrity Evangelist, the guy's named Dylan Novak, if they want to go watch those two interviews, seemed very sincere, and I am pretty convinced that the Prince of Darkness is now with the Prince of Peace. And so if he is,
Wonderful, man.
go ahead.
Well, there's like I'm rereading a book I mentioned to you before called The Ragamuffin Gospel, and there's a quote in it, and I've looked it up. It's like an unattributed quote. There's some ideas about where it might come from, but it says, the church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. And it's like, like that. I often think this. It's like if Jesus came today, like where would he be sitting breaking bread with people? Probably in a crack house,
Yeah.
because those were, he sat with tax collectors, and like he touched lepers, like, and the equivalent today is like a crack addict, like a prostitute, a street prostitute. Those are the kind of, the woman at the well, like married 5 times, living with a husband, living with a man that wasn't her husband. Like that would raise eyebrows today,
Right.
but in like Samaria, in like, like 32 AD or whatever it was, like that is really something. So it's like, yeah, it's exactly that's exactly, that he comes for the
Yeah.
confused and the lost,
Well, he
and
goes from
not
yeah,
the so-called already righteous.
yep. He's come for the lost sheep. And that's people just need to realize that
Yeah.
there's so many people that have people in their lives that they think that may be too far gone. Never stop praying. Um, the guy talking about all those people praying about Ozzy, I'm telling you that stuff. That I'm telling you, it has an effect. I mentioned in my book. You probably don't recall, but the day that I was walking, I'd been out drinking. My car ran out of gas. I'm walking in the rain home, and I encounter a guy standing by a car by the road, and this was back in the middle of all of my, everything that I was doing, and at the, I was in the despair and the drugs and the crime. And I walked by the guy and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And we talked for a second, and he asked me my name. I said, "Pat McCool." He said, "I've heard of you." He said, "We've been praying for you." And this was a student at USM, because it was over by what I was coming from a party off the campus. And and I went in, these people knew who I was. I stuck my head in there, and it was, "That's Pat. Oh, that's Pat. Hey." I mean, I'd been drinking. I didn't stay long or anything, but that never left me. Somebody was praying for me. So if you've got people out there that or people in your life, pray for them. The people that my wife prays for blows my mind. She starts mentioning, I'm like, gosh, I don't even like that person. She says, "Yeah, I know. That's why, that's why I'm praying for him." But it's powerful. And I think that had an impact on Oz's
Yeah.
life. I know it had an impact on my life. Probably had an impact on yours. You probably had people along the way, and it's impacted all of our lives. So never ever give up. And speaking of never giving up, that's kind of something where you were today. You were supposed to speak at a prison today. You're going to do that at a later date, did you say?
No, it was so there was a complication, unfortunately. So I was asked to go and speak alongside a pastor friend of mine at a recovery like speaker event. Unfortunately, my details didn't make it to the prison governor. The prison, I don't know, I think you had the same time over there, the prison governor.
No,
And
wait a second. I don't want to
so
interrupt you. Could you clear up at one point? I mean, clear up once and for all. What does governor mean? I watch all these British shows, and it's, "Hey, Gov. What's up, Gov?" What a governor is.
oh well that's the colloquial, like that's like, all right, gov, like it's just a way of like, it's like saying, all right, boss, or like it's like it's just a kind of slang
Gotcha,
greeting,
gotcha.
like that you might say to someone that was in some position of authority, like potentially, it's quite old fashioned. But yeah, in this instant, this would not be the slang term. This would be the prison governor, which so,
You're the
and like
actual
my
guy,
basically
though.
my yeah, my details didn't get cleared in time for me to enter the prison, unfortunately. But over the weekend, I was lucky enough to go to a conference, a Believers in Recovery conference, which is Believers in Recovery is like an amazing recovery focused ministry. Kind of sits between like 12-step meetings in the church. The idea of it is like the mission statement is it's for people that don't get enough recovery in the church, but don't get enough Christianity in their 12-step groups. So it kind of sits in the middle, and that's where I came to faith by attending Believers in Recovery meetings. So that it has a huge like place in my heart. I'm very grateful to Believers in Recovery. So we went there. My other half and I went there. It was actually in my old hometown, Pat. So like
By the sea?
your Hattiesburg. Yeah. Yeah, by the sea, South Inland Sea. So actually, where this conference was, I was stabbed about 3/4 of a mile in that direction. I used to smoke crack in a house about 500 yards away. There was a gas station just along the road from where I was, where I used to steal food. I got chased out of there by the security guards. Like, I remember I threw a chicken mayo sandwich at the security guard as I was running. So yeah, going back there kind of 13 years
So
clean,
that's where
to worship and learn and
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah.
That's where you were having this meeting, was in that
Yeah.
right by where all this is
Yeah, yeah,
growing.
yeah.
Well, so go on. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was great, man. And like, like I've got, a lot of friends, a lot of new people there. A lot of people gave their life to Jesus during the worship there. Like there was this kind of moment where the spirit moved, and one of the pastors just got up on the stage and spontaneously called, did like the altar call, and probably about 12, maybe 15 kind of new people. Um, but I think I got the impression that just were in the recovery community in that town, but had just come along to have a look at Believers in Recovery just because it was a recovery event that happened to be on there. Yeah. And they came forward like this, like these two rows of people just responded to the altar call spontaneously, just went to the front and they gave their life to Jesus. And very powerful, very, very powerful. So for me, it's, a fantastic weekend, obviously nothing better than seeing the spirit move in that way and touch people. Um, some great speakers. It was just, fantastic, really, really fantastic. And obviously very powerful for me being back in that exact area, as a Christian, 13 years clean, with a life that's like, literally transformed from what it was. Yeah.
How did you how did you get back to that town? I mean, do you go to services there, or is it just a recovery meeting that you decided to go to? I
So,
mean, back in South End
so
by the
again.
sea, because you're living in Oxford. Were you in London over the weekend?
Oh no, so I travelled from London to Southend, and we had some accommodation. We got some accommodation down there, and just yeah, and then went to the event on Saturday. It was nice. Spent Friday showing my partner some of my old haunts, some of the glamorous locations where I used to hang out. Like I think you'd probably call them dive bars.
Say it again.
Yeah, like a dive
Oh,
bar. Like
yeah,
we'd
yeah,
call them
yeah,
like
dive bar for sure.
yeah, like ropey pubs basically, and yeah, just a lot of a lot of places where a lot of difficult stuff happened. Went to see my mum's grave, went and visit my brother, and went to this recovery conference. So yeah, big weekend in a lot of ways, Pat. Big weekend, and like lots of like some, the a lot of the teaching focused on like basically like living out God's purpose, like it's not about me, it's not about us, it's not about you, it's about being willing, like how far are you willing to go for him, like how much of your life is about your own, more speak for me, like my own plans and designs and what I think I need and how much money I need to make and what car I should be driving and how able are we, am I, like actually to get out of the way and listen, be willing to, like to listen to what the spirit is prompting me to do, and it's very like I find, getting those kind of reminders is always, always a good thing, of course. And there was a couple of speakers from Brooklyn. Just another shout out to there's an organisation in Brooklyn that started in Brooklyn called the Recovery House of Worship, which is an American recovery ministry. They have online meetings every week. If you Google RHOW, Staten Island now, that'll bring up their website. They have Zoom services and speakers and teachings and stuff. So a couple of pastors from there, Pastor Raymond Ramos, Pastor Anthony Edwin, I think. Yeah, fantastic, man. Fantastic event.
They came they came all the way from Brooklyn to have the event. So it was, again, it wasn't just a service. This was a whole recovery event that people attended.
Oh yeah, it was a whole day. It was like well, it was Friday night. I didn't go on the Friday night. Friday night worship, one speaker, opening prayers, bit of fellowship time, all that kind of thing. And then on Saturday it was like doors open at 9, last speaker finished at 6 p.m. You know, full day, food, teachings, worship, prayer, you know, fellowship time. It's great, man. Do you know what I mean? And in fact, some of the guys, they felt prompted during the service that actually when the service or during the course of the day that when it finished, they went into one of the local we call it estates, you would call it housing projects. Yeah. So they went into one of the local housing projects to preach and to, you know, try and kind of spread the gospel. So it's very powerful, man. Very, very powerful day. Very
Name of the
spiritual.
name of these people out of the outfit out of Brooklyn again? How do they find it?
Oh, so you got past gone? Were you
No, no, go ahead. You said how they can find it, how people can find it online. People that might be interested in
oh, so yeah, so if you put into Google Recovery House of Worship or RHOW, Staten Island, um, then that will bring up the Recovery House of Worship website, and then on there has got their you know, their timetable, their, you know, the Zoom codes to get into their meetings and stuff like that. So um, yeah, that highly recommend. I've learned a lot. You know, that I've done quite a lot. I've attended quite a lot of their teachings and stuff, and yeah, it's very powerful. You know, great vessels there, basically, great vessels, man.
That's fantastic. So you're saying that they're kind of a cross between the 12-step program and the cross and you know and what's teaching in a church, but they obviously led these people to salvation.
Yeah, so it bridges the gap. That's what it does. It bridges the gap because there can be a gap. You know, 12-step groups can be very secular, yeah, these days. And which of course is interesting given the roots of the program, but they can be very secular. Um, so being a Christian in a 12-step group is different. I mean, obviously, as you know, I've spent time in Mississippi, I've spent time in your hometown, and actually AA meetings that I attended there were much more openly Christian than you would ever see in the UK. So, but then in other 12-step groups, you know, the fellowship that I attend, I won't name because of anonymity and traditions and stuff, but uh, there that's tends to be very, very secular. So if you're a Christian, if you come to faith through working the 12 steps, which many of us do, it's helpful to be able to kind of go somewhere else to get fed spiritually, and of course to serve, you know, to put back into you know, to serve, um where like you know, you're getting taught about Jesus and with other people, you know, with spending time with other Christians, but where there is an understanding of what recovery is, because sometimes there isn't. Sometimes that can be lacking in the church, is the truth, you know, and that can cause problems sometimes, you know, because people, you know, there is a point of view that, you know, like it's like the word addict doesn't appear in the Bible, you know, so it's like, well, if people are still referring, so I would go to a meeting and say, my name's Rich, I'm an addict, you know, from a there's a theological perspective that would then say, well, you're not an addict, you're a new creation, you've been washed clean, so you need to let go of that identity, right? But what can happen sometimes is people let go of that identity and they lose touch with the fact that addiction is a lifelong condition that you have to maintain vigilance around to, you know, to avoid returning to, you know, and that undoes people sometimes. You know, I've seen that happen a number of times, but you know, someone very close to me, you know, got 3 years clean, um bought into those ideas, decided that they could, you know, drink socially, you know, and ended up in I think a 2-year relapse onto cocaine and alcohol, and kind of made it back by the skin of her teeth. So yeah, so that's why recover. That's my take. You know, I'm sure other people, you know, will have other perspectives on it, but that is certainly my perspective on the importance of recovery ministries. Why they're an important thing.
Well, I mean, that's part of your occupation as an addiction specialist, so you see it every single day. people that don't deal with people that are actual addicts, it's easy to form an opinion when you're not, when you're not actually seeing it and dealing with it and living with it. And as I told you, mine was more of an emotional type thing, but I know people that were just physical. I know people 10 years, 15 years, everything's going fine. All of a sudden, one night binge, and they've thrown, there goes the family, the wife, this, or and everything that they had built and that they had worked up. So I certainly see what you're saying. So it sounds like a great organization. And they came over and held that, and then they did an altar call at the end, and they had a number of people find salvation or answer the altar call.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and just to be really clear, Platt, so Believers in Recovery is a UK-based recovery ministry, but it has links to these guys out of Brooklyn. So these guys out of Brooklyn came to speak at
At,
Believers in
at
Recovery.
Believers in
So
Recovery, and they knew the Pastor Ramos, the one that you know from Brooklyn, and they're kind of part of
yeah,
the same. So they came over. So uh, they preached the gospel, and you said a couple of whole rows of people.
yeah. Like these two rows of people just kind of got up and just went straight to the front, responded to the altar call, which is obviously kind of an amazing thing, really, to see. And yeah, special,
Yeah.
very special.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, you did mention it's the AA meetings over here. You say were leaned more with preaching, leaned more spiritual, talking about Jesus in the AA meetings that you were in Mississippi. Did you say you attended some here?
Yeah. So I did. Yeah, I did a lot of meetings over there, and yeah, like much more. We'll often kind of close with the Lord's Prayer. We'll, we'll talk about that they're happy for people to, talk about scripture, Bible verses, and stuff during the course of the meeting, all that kind of stuff. And definitely much more open. But of course, you're in the Bible Belt, right? I mean, you are like when I was in Mississippi, like you'd drive past a church, then there was another church in the corner, and there was a church opposite that, and then just down the road was a church.
Right,
Like
right.
all different shapes. And some of the churches, Pat, they were like small towns, like
Well, that's
um,
that's why I teed that up. That's what we were going to talk about next time. We're going to talk about the differences between um, church in England and church in America and church in the South, and because I've been up north, and there's a lot of differences, a lot of humorous differences, and what it was like for me and Rich when we first started walking up in a church. But there are quite the differences between England, and there's a lot going on. In England, I understand that there's a bit of a revival, a bit of a resurgence going on in England, which is amazing because some of the roots of the more powerful people. The Bible was translated in England because of England, and there's a lot there, and that's what we were going to discuss today. But we had a couple other things to talk about, and we're gonna have to leave it right here. And but next time, join us where we do talk about the differences between the church in England and the church in America. And as you said, we have one. That's how you get directions in America. You go 2 miles to the Baptist church, and you take a right and go another mile to the Methodist church, and then you go over here and then you take one there, and then the one I love, the people in the South will give you, they'll be like, go 5 miles down the road and take a left where the old church used to be. Like, okay, it's a
yeah,
field
I love
now, but
that. Yeah,
we got you. So,
yeah.
well, anyway, Rich, well, it's good to see you, man. I'm glad you had a good weekend. Are you going to go back to the prison ministry? Are they going to reschedule that?
Well, that event happened today, but I occasionally go and speak in prisons.
I did
I
not
got
know
asked
that.
to speak at one next month.
Yeah.
Yeah. I occasionally get asked to speak in prison. So I've been in maybe 10 different English jails speaking, but yeah, I think there's another one coming. I just need to see if it can work date wise, but I'll definitely keep you and all our listeners
I
posted
never
on
knew
that as and
about
when it
that. You
happens.
see, again, that's something we have in common. You've been in 9 or 10 English jails speaking. When I was a teenager, I was in 9 or 10 American jails, and I was speaking like, "When's my dad gonna come get me out of here?" So, So we both had visits to the jail. We were just doing two different things, but fortunately, I was able to leave that back.
Different ends of the process.
Different ends of the process. But um, anyway, have a good one, Rich, and let's talk to you next week.
Nice one. Lovely, Pat.
All
You
right,
take
love
care.
you,
God
man.
bless you,
Take
man.
care.
Bye. You too.